As I opened the front door, there he stood, Oliver, clad in a flashy leather jacket and sunglasses. "It's been a while, Oliver," I managed to say as he barged into the house without hesitation, his sudden return after years of disappearance shocking me. Behind him stood a young woman cradling a baby. Who on earth could she be? Before I could voice my confusion, Oliver introduced them. "This is Stella, my girlfriend, and our child Hazel." I was dumbstruck by the whirlwind of unexpected news. And when he mentioned having something important to discuss, his request left me reeling. "I want you to take custody of Chloe and get a divorce." What? I struggled to comprehend his words. How could he even suggest such a thing? Chloe, standing beside me, looked devastated. Then, unexpectedly, she spoke up. "Mom, divorce isn't an option." Oliver and Stella paled at Chloe's words. "My name is Luna Smith," she continued calmly, "a 50-year-old woman, raising my high school daughter Chloe. Oliver, also 50, is my husband, though we haven't lived together for years. In fact, I don't even know where he's been all this time." Oliver had vanished years ago, leaving me to search desperately, filing reports and reaching out to everyone I could. His sudden return now felt surreal, bringing one shocking revelation after another. Life's twists had never seemed more bewildering. But before delving into Oliver's return, let me share a bit about my own journey. Raised by a loving yet strict father after losing my mother at a young age, I was encouraged to pursue my passions without hesitation. His words echoed in my mind as I navigated life's challenges, grateful for his unwavering support during my formative years. After securing a job, I threw myself into work and enjoyed hobbies and travel with friends whenever possible, relishing a fulfilling life. Time slipped by unnoticed, and suddenly I found myself at 30, starting to feel the pressure of marriage. That's when Oliver entered my life, introduced by a friend. Oliver was my age, charismatic and full of energy, always immersed in some adventure or another. His infectious enthusiasm gradually drew me in, and after dating for a while, he proposed. I said yes, swept up in his lively spirit. But my father, usually quiet on such matters, voiced his concerns about Oliver. "I just worry about that guy," he would say repeatedly. I defended Oliver fiercely, insisting he was kind-hearted despite his carefree demeanor. Looking back now, I see my father was right. He rarely objected to my choices, and I should have listened. Yet I was soon to discover I was pregnant. Around this time, Oliver began to reveal his true nature. "Check out this bike. I'm getting one next payday," he exclaimed excitedly, pointing at a motorcycle in a magazine. His newfound obsession with motorcycles grew, consuming his weekends and stretching our finances thin. When I questioned him, he brushed off my concerns, dismissing them as nagging. Recently, Oliver's behavior had soared. I wondered if it was just a rough patch, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd become a lower priority since our marriage. Little did I know, a devastating turn of events was looming. One day, a shiny new motorcycle appeared in front of our house. I took out a loan for it, Oliver proudly announced. I was furious. His thoughtless spending jeopardized our financial stability, especially with a baby on the way. Grumbling to myself, I rubbed my belly, pondering our situation. A few days later, while preparing dinner, I received a call from Oliver. He was supposed to be out riding, but something had gone wrong. His voice trembled as he uttered chilling words. "Luna, something terrible happened. I was speeding and hit someone." My mind went blank. Oliver explained the person was unconscious, and he had called an ambulance. He sounded slightly injured himself, but the details were unclear. "Let me know when the ambulance arrives and which hospital they go to. I'm coming," I managed to reply before hastily ending the call. Arriving at the hospital, I found Oliver in the waiting room, speaking with the police. His knee was bandaged from a scrape, but otherwise he'd appeared unharmed. I joined the conversation to gather details about the incident. The victim, Luke Jones, was a young businessman. His parents and wife arrived with anxious faces. His condition was critical. Moments later, a doctor emerged from an operating room, and the grim expression on his face told me what I feared. Confirming our worst fears, he solemnly announced, "He didn't make it." The wife's anguished cries pierced through the hospital corridor. What followed was a descent into chaos. Oliver was swiftly arrested, facing serious charges for a fatal traffic accident. Mr. Tanaka, the victim, had been crossing legally on a green light when Oliver, speeding through a red light, struck him. The tragic outcome escalated the severity of the incident. Adding to the horror, Oliver's motorcycle was uninsured, leaving the victim's family to rely on mandatory liability insurance for compensation. Even then, it wasn't enough, and Oliver was liable for the remaining expenses. I'm in a bind, Luna. Can you help cover it? Oliver's request, made with casual disregard, left me speechless. I don't have that kind of money, I replied, stunned not just by the financial burden but by Oliver's callous demeanor. He seemed detached from the gravity of the situation, focusing instead on the inconvenience of his impending imprisonment. Traffic jail might be lighter than regular jail, luckily. I'll have time to catch up on my comics, he remarked with unsettling nonchalance. Since becoming pregnant, I had seen glimpses of Oliver's frivolous side, but I never imagined it could manifest in such a catastrophic way. I was at my wit's end. That's when my father stepped in to help, I recounted. I understand the situation. I'll cover the compensation, but there's a condition, my father offered. Oliver, visibly relieved, quickly agreed to my father's terms. And so my father settled the remaining compensation on Oliver's behalf. With savings from his days managing an apartment building, my father made it possible. 2 years later, Oliver was released from traffic prison. His former job was long gone, but my father, leveraging his connections, secured Oliver a position at a small company. Grateful for the opportunity, Oliver's attitude toward my father softened. He provided financial support and ensured Oliver stayed on track, wary of his opportunistic tendencies. You've shown recklessness, and this accident reflects that. Are you truly reflecting on it? Remember the victim and lead a righteous life, my father advised sternly. Yes, I mean, of course. I'll turn over a new leaf and do my best, Oliver promised. For a time, Oliver lived modestly. He approached his job earnestly and took care of Flo, our daughter. Every month, without fail, he visited the victim's grave, demonstrating remorse. I once penned a letter to the bereaved family, but it was returned. They had moved away. During those years, Oliver seemed genuinely remorseful and committed to change. But as a decade passed, cracks began to show in his facade. Around then, my father's health declined, and hospital visits became routine. Eventually diagnosed with a rare illness, he struggled to leave the house even after discharge. My days became consumed with caregiving and work with Chloe now in middle school. She was dependable and managed much on her own. Balancing her studies during exams was challenging, and our lives were stretched thin, barely meeting ends meet. During that period, Oliver's once hidden frivolous and irrational side began surfacing. His spending spiraled out of control, consumed by hobbies and drinking. No amount of cautioning made a dent. Instead, he'd retort defiantly, "It's my money, I'll spend it as I please," growing more obstinate. Then he started returning home in the early morning hours. "Where have you been?" I'd demand, weary from caregiving. As Oliver staggered through the door, his face flushed, likely from drinking. "It doesn't matter now with Dad in that state. He can't say anything to me," he dismissed, "so I might as well enjoy myself and make new connections. It's a blast." "What are you even saying? You're neglecting the household. I'm juggling work and caregiving, Chloe's struggling with her exams, and you're coasting." I couldn't contain my frustration. Oliver just chuckled. "It's just a break, all right? I'm tired of playing the perfect husband. I hate feeling tied down by these roles. Husband, father, I want freedom." His words left me stunned. "I can't believe you. You're not single. We have a family, especially Chloe. She's still a minor, and you. You're so annoying," Oliver interrupted, exasperated. "The one time I come home, and this is what I get. It's exhausting." With an exaggerated sigh, he left again, taking advantage of the weekend to wander, a freedom I envied. I expected him to return when he felt like it, but after that day, Oliver never came home. Initially, I thought he might be staying with a friend, but no one knew his whereabouts. Reluctantly, I contacted his workplace. To my surprise, I learned he had resigned months earlier. Disbelief flooded me. Where could he be? The only place that came to mind was his parents' house. Although Oliver rarely got along with his parents and seldom visited them, I called my mother-in-law in desperation. As expected, she said, "I don't know. He's not here." As a last resort, I turned to the police. I filed a missing person report, but his location remained unknown. It seemed there were people assisting with his disappearance, but their identities and motives eluded discovery. Meanwhile, my father passed away. By the time Oliver vanished, my father was already on a ventilator and unable to communicate well. Tearfully, I went through the motions of arranging the funeral. I felt immense guilt for marrying such a selfish man as Oliver, causing my father so much worry. Remorse weighed heavily on me. Another regret plagued me. With my father's money, I had planned to rebuild our house. The idea was to demolish his old home and construct an accessible new one on the property. We hoped living together would bring my father happiness. But that dream dissolved with his passing. Frustration filled me as I mourned. Between Oliver's disappearance and my father's death, it seemed troubles arrived in pairs, leaving me utterly disheartened. The plan for a new home had to be shelved as I navigated daily life, gradually regaining strength. Despite my father's absence, I eventually resolved to use the money he left us to build the house. Those of us left behind had to continue living. Eventually, the house was finished, and Chloe and I moved from our old apartment to our new home. Standing before our house, a strange sense of peace washed over me. Even Chloe couldn't help but smile. There's no point in dwelling forever. Let's start fresh here, I said aloud, just as something unexpected occurred. One morning, the doorbell rang abruptly. Opening the door, I was shocked to see Oliver standing there. Oliver, clad in a flashy leather jacket and sunglasses. What on earth? How did you find this place? I demanded, taken aback. Long time no see, Oliver replied casually, striding into the house as if he owned it. Building a new house on your dad's land, huh? That's a bold move. Ignoring my questions, Oliver made himself at home, acting as if nothing had happened during his absence. Why are you just walking in? Where have you been all these years? Do you have any idea how desperately we've been searching for you? I pressed, frustration and confusion mingling in my voice. Hey, don't be so upset. Let's all sit down and talk, Oliver suggested, taking charge as if he hadn't been missing for years. Mom, who is this? Chloe interrupted her studies, coming over to investigate the commotion. Oh, Chloe, huh? You've grown, Oliver remarked casually, but Chloe's expression hardened. She had witnessed firsthand the turmoil Oliver had put me through. Her disdain for her father was palpable. Following Oliver into the house was a young woman, catching Chloe's suspicious eye. The woman, heavily made up with brightly dyed hair and flashy attire, held a baby and smiled triumphantly. Discomfort settled over me like a wave. Do you two know each other? It's our first time meeting, Oliver introduced. This is Stella, my girlfriend. Despite her surprise, Stella greeted us calmly. Pleased to meet you, she said with composure. After disappearing for years, Oliver returned suddenly with a girlfriend in tow. It seemed surreal, but what came next was even more shocking. Oliver proudly pointed to the baby Stella held. This is Hazel, our daughter. Isn't she adorable? A child? I felt dizzy, struggling to keep my balance. How could Oliver be so lacking in common sense? Was he always this irresponsible? I managed to find my voice, barely able to comprehend the situation. You show up out of nowhere with a girlfriend and a child? What is all this about? Shouldn't you have sorted this out after getting a divorce? You are, Oliver began, but I cut him off sharply. Stop. Enough with the excuses. Can we focus on the present situation? Why are you here? Despite my interruption, Oliver confidently gestured to Stella and took a seat, as if he owned the place. Their brazen behavior and mindset were beyond our understanding. How can we even consider a favor from people as irresponsible as you two? Just leave now, Chloe exclaimed, her disgust evident. Oliver pretended to be startled. Oh, scary, scary. Chloe's becoming just like Luna, not cute at all. Don't make fun of me, Chloe, I intervened, glaring at Oliver and Stella, then placing a reassuring hand on Chloe's shoulder. Let's take a moment to calm down, Chloe. I wasn't sure if it would be worthwhile, but we needed to hear them out without letting Oliver's presence dictate our emotions. Taking a deep breath, I managed to calm Chloe, who seemed ready to confront Oliver. Finally, we all sat down. What have you been up to since you left? I inquired, trying to keep my tone neutral. Just before I left, I met Stella working at a club. She's young and cute, and we really hit it off, Oliver explained, flashing a smile at Stella. It was so unsettling, it almost bordered on absurdity. So, I shared with her how I was having a tough time with you and your parents, and she suggested I move in with her. So I did. And you know what? It's been great. Stella isn't always on my case like you are. She's kind. Then we had Hazel, and Stella said if I took care of her, I didn't need to work anymore. So, I quit my job, became a stay-at-home dad, you know. Oliver continued, seemingly unaffected by our stunned silence. Sometimes Stella travels for work at clubs in different cities, and I'd tag along. Living in various places across the country felt like a permanent vacation. It was awesome. No wonder you couldn't track me down. Essentially, I've been living off a younger woman. But now that Hazel is old enough for daycare, we thought it was time to settle down. That's why we're back. And then we stumbled upon your new house, followed you here, and were surprised by what we found. Looks like you guys are living the good life, huh? Oliver rambled on, his grin widening. Despite my efforts to remain composed, it was challenging dealing with someone so disconnected from common sense. So, what exactly are you saying? I asked tersely. Oliver declared proudly, basically, we want this house. It's spacious and suits us better. We'll put it to good use. I'll divorce Luna so you and Shlo can move out. What? What are you even talking about? I responded, incredulous. Oliver hesitated before continuing. I'll give up custody of Hazel, so just divorce me and leave. At that moment, it became utterly incomprehensible. How could someone think like this? I was at a loss for words, but unexpectedly, Chilo spoke up. Divorcing you, Mom, isn't an option because, Chilo's voice turned cold. Have you forgotten Grandpa's condition? Grandpa's condition? Oliver looked puzzled, clearly caught off guard. What are you talking about? That incident, Stella interjected, equally perplexed. Didn't you know, even though you're his girlfriend? Oliver was involved in a motorcycle accident where someone died, and my father paid compensation to the victim's family. But there was a stipulation. I will cover the compensation to Mr. Jones's family. However, if anything leads to the dissolution of my marriage with Oliver, I will reclaim the entire amount from him. As the weight of my words sank in, Oliver and Stella paled visibly. Oliver must recall agreeing to those terms, although he was likely too focused on the money to remember the specifics. I stated firmly, leaving the house without permission, disappearing without a trace, and on top of that, having an affair and a child, it's safe to say our marriage is irreparably broken. But your father has passed away now, right? Those conditions surely can't still apply, Oliver countered, visibly flustered. Unfortunately, my father's passing doesn't nullify it. We documented it in writing, making it legally binding. If you violate it, we have grounds for a lawsuit. And there's more to the agreement. If you can't repay the money, you're required to work at a day labor facility my father specified, with wages deducted accordingly. Oliver was speechless, attempting to respond but unable to find words. It was evident he lacked the funds. Oliver had always been impulsive with spending, devoid of savings. Even now, relying on Stella's income from the club, he must be financially strapped. The day labor facility remained his sole recourse, a prospect Oliver dreaded. After all, he was originally slated to work there upon release, a place where ex-convicts engage in demanding physical labor. No, I have money, Oliver asserted in a strained voice. Oh, really? Where is it then? Well, Stella does have money. She's a top hostess, earns quite a bit. So, paying that compensation won't be a problem for her. Oliver regained his composure, chuckling dismissively. Is that so? As long as the compensation is repaid, the method doesn't matter. But here's the deal, Stella. Either pay up or work at the day labor facility. We can discuss divorce after the debt is settled. I can't risk letting you both roam freely without knowing what you might do next, I said coldly. Oliver smirked in response. Haha, like I'd ever do day labor. Just have Stella handle it. And we're good. I had nearly forgotten about that old accident. You haven't visited the grave or thought about the victim's family since you left, I said incredulously. Oliver's casual demeanor was unbelievable. Then he turned to Stella. Right, Stella? You feel the same way, don't you? Hey, Stella? What's wrong? Stella had been acting strangely, remaining silent and avoiding eye contact. Upon closer inspection, her face was pale, and her lips trembled. Finally, she spoke in a trembling voice. It was you, Oliver. What's going on, Stella? Stella suddenly lifted her head, her eyes filled with tears and anger as she shouted, You were the one who ran over my dad, Oliver. Chloe and I were stunned by this revelation. What does she mean? I asked, bewildered. Stella began to explain, her voice fraught with emotion. When I was 5, my dad was hit and killed by a motorcycle that ran a red light. I was too young to understand anything. My beloved dad was suddenly gone, and my days were filled with sadness. My mom became withdrawn and decided to move us far away to protect me from further pain. She shielded me from the details, so I never knew the person responsible was Oliver. But how could you say the victim's family has forgotten? I've never forgotten a single day. I can never forgive the person who took my dad away. Stella's voice quivered with pain and bitterness. We were stunned to learn that Stella was connected to the victim of Oliver's accident. Oliver appeared more panicked than ever. But the last names are different, right? The person I hit was a Jones. Stella's last name is Williams. It must be a case of mistaken identity. Oliver stammered nervously. My mom remarried after my dad passed away, which is why my last name changed to Williams. Before that, it was Jones. My dad's name was Luke Jones, Stella explained calmly. As soon as the words left her mouth, Oliver went pale. He seemed utterly shaken, his eyes darting around, sweat beading on his forehead. Meanwhile, Stella's voice dripped with contempt. To dismiss the suffering of the victim's family and laugh it off. Disgusting. That's the kind of person you are, Oliver. You never intended to take responsibility. Don't you dare mock me. Stella's eyes blazed with anger, her gaze unwavering. Baby Hazel, cradled in her arms, began to cry, but Stella paid her no attention. In the tense silence that followed, only the baby's cries filled the room. Oliver appeared to have lost his ability to speak, looking empty and defeated. Breaking the silence, I interjected, "So, that's the situation. Now, regarding the future, Stella, about continuing to live with Oliver in this house." "Are you kidding me? I could never live with a man like him," Stella cut in, her expression one of pure disdain. It was hard to believe they had once been in love. "A man who caused such devastation to a family," Till quietly added, her voice firm. "You were about to repeat history, weren't you?" The room fell into a heavy silence once more. Stella hesitated before speaking slowly. What did you just say?" "I'm sorry for what my father did in that accident, but that doesn't justify entering into a relationship with a married man and having a child, does it? What you did may not be a crime punishable by law like what my father did, but in terms of breaking up a family, it's just as devastating. You were trying to take away our father, even though he's a terrible husband, a terrible father. Maybe he's different from your dad, but the pain of a shattered family is the same. You must understand the suffering Chloe and I have endured." Stella's resolve faltered, and she fell silent. After a prolonged silence, Stella began to speak haltingly. "After the accident took my dad, my mom and I moved to a completely new place. She remarried, but I never got along with my stepfather. I didn't want to stay in that household, so I started spending more time away." Stella chuckled bitterly at herself. "I dropped out of high school and started working at a club. It brought in money, but there were plenty of tough times too. I always felt my life was hard because my beloved father was gone, so I lived with a deep hatred for the person who took him from me." Stella paused briefly before continuing. "Chloe, right? You're correct. I knew Oliver was married and had a child, but I didn't care about the other family. I was resigned. But now I see that I've caused you and your family the same pain I endured as a child." Stella looked visibly distraught. When she had entered with Oliver, she seemed confident and even smiled. But now she appeared much younger, likely in her early 20s. With over a 20-year age difference, she was with a man in his 50s like Oliver. Was she seeking the fatherly affection she had missed? After hearing her story, it seemed like the most plausible explanation. "I'm sorry." A tear fell from Stella's eye. As Hazel curiously looked at her, Stella spoke through tears. "I'll raise Hazel on my own. I understand." I nodded in acknowledgement. "Stella is still young. I hope she reflects on this and starts anew, steering clear of paths that lead her astray and avoiding men like Oliver," I remarked. With that resolved, it was Oliver's turn. "So, your fate is decided. You'll be working at the day labor facility," I stated firmly. Oliver, who had been silent until then, quickly objected. "No, hold on. I can't handle such a tough job. Give me something easier. I need a light job with regular hours, like 9 to 5, Oliver pleaded. "What are you talking about? There's no such place. Considering you already have a criminal record, you should consider yourself fortunate to have any opportunity at all," I replied firmly. "That's it," Oliver let out a pathetic sound. Stella and Chloe looked at him with complete disdain. "We've caused you a lot of trouble," Stella said as she stood up. Chloe wore a complex expression, but I met Stella's eyes and nodded. Holding Hazel tightly, Stella left. Once Stella was out of sight, Chloe murmured, "Mom, are you sure? Shouldn't we have been tougher on her?" "It's okay now. I believe those tears were genuine. I was raised by a single parent too. I can somewhat understand Stella's feelings. She seemed to regret getting involved with a married man like Oliver, and I hope she will live honestly and focus on raising her child from now on. That's my sincere wish. Well, Oliver didn't move an inch when I looked at him. He seemed completely drained, perhaps terrified of what the future holds for him. And rightfully so. Oliver now has to atone for his actions over a long period. A few days later, I handed Oliver over to the director of the Day Labor Center, a friend of my father. Please be careful. This man has developed a habit of taking things lightly, so he might slack off or attempt to escape, causing you trouble. No worries. We're used to handling such individuals. The director laughed heartily. The place was filled with ex-convicts similar to Oliver. Families had given up on these hopeless cases. Attempts to escape were not uncommon among this group. However, most of the facility staff had experience working in security or were connected to law enforcement. Surrounded by strong individuals, escape would be difficult for the workers. There seems to be a hierarchy within the facility, with newcomers at the bottom getting worked hard. I hope that through the physical and mental challenges there, Oliver can finally become a better person. As for me, I had already initiated divorce proceedings. Initially, my plan was to finalize the divorce after he repaid the debt in full. However, the wages he earned from labor were lower than expected, so I arranged for Oliver to borrow money from a consumer finance company affiliated with the facility. He would repay me in full and then repay the consumer finance company. This brought a significant amount of money into my hands, originally my father's. I wanted to use it in a way he would have approved of if he were still here. With that intention, I donated part of the funds to an organization supporting children who lost parents in traffic accidents. It's my hope to alleviate the suffering of those affected by such tragedies. My father would surely have done the same. As I remembered my dear father, tears welled up. Years have passed since then. I continue with my work as usual. Flo is now a university student, diligently pursuing a challenging national certification. Unlike Oliver, she has grown into a grounded and responsible person. Despite all that has happened, seeing her thrive fills me with gratitude. Reflecting on the turbulent days when Oliver was part of our lives, I now cherish the peace of ordinary days. Being able to lead a tranquil life is more precious to me than anything else. I hope this serenity continues indefinitely.